Hey lady, welcome to the Postpartum on Purpose podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Anne Marie. I'm wife to James and mom to 5 beautiful kids ages 9 and under with 1 miscarried baby. Here we see postpartum, all the way from birth to the first year of life, as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 69. Hi lady, I hope you're so well. Let's start out with free things as we do these days. And the purpose of sharing free things each week is twofold. One, as a reminder that it is possible to live a rich, beautiful, meaningful life without breaking the bank, no matter how many kids you have. And then 2, that part of living that rich, meaningful life is to practice gratitude for the things that are already available, already happening, already going on, and paying attention to and taking note of free things. It's just one easy way to be really grateful. Okay, free things this week. 1, Chick-fil-A. Listen, this is the time of year. If you do not already have a Chick-fil-A One account, which is not a credit card, it's just their rewards app. If you don't already have one, it is time. It is time. We are heading into the season of giving and the season of receiving, and they start sending out crazy free things the closer we get to Christmas. Okay, last week they sent a free cookie. That was delicious. I had that with my daughter as we were running in between errands for something. It was very fun. We just split it, the two of us, and yeah, it's just a moment of connection. I really appreciate it. And then also a friend passed on a bag of 4T clothes to me, which was very kind because I have, in fact, a young man in 4T clothing. Then 2 things this week for one small change, maybe even 3. Oh, one is that I did not grow up making homemade pizza, but I make it now sometimes. And it's kind of an ordeal. But the other night I was gone. When it was time to put it together, I came back in time for supper. So I had made the dough and wrote down for my son what needed to happen, but my husband is the one who kind of put the pizzas together and put them in the oven. I have thought my entire life that if you made a homemade pizza, it was just a given that cheese was going to be baked on to the side and it was going to be a bear to remove. And that was not what happened on Sunday night when it was time to clean the dishes. My daughter was scrubbing and the pans were cleaned super fast. And I asked my husband what had happened. And it all came down to the fact that he was just very careful when he put the cheese around the edges of the pizza, that none of it spilled over and then none of it baked on. And then it wasn't a bear to clean. And you might think, for goodness sakes, Anne-Marie, you're 35 years old. I thought the same thing, but yet here we are. There's no change too small for me, apparently. And it's also never too late to learn, I guess. The other thing, this is a little bit more serious, but this is something I'm just trying to pay attention to. I'm not sharing it with you as a point of something I've mastered, but something I'm trying to pay attention to is this tendency that I have to want to critique my children in public before somebody else could possibly do so. And I do think, of course, as I'm sure you do too, I do think it's important to be aware of how our children's actions may be impacting other people. But I think in the past, I have gone a little overboard, especially the more children that I have, assuming that other people were going to be judgmental towards us, assuming that on their behalf. And I think I've been invited more recently, just kind of noticing this. I've been invited into a little bit more vulnerability to allow my children to be who they are, as long as it's not openly rude, right? But maybe more enthusiastic than I would like. Maybe I would like them to be a little bit quieter or calmer, and just sort of let things unfold and allow them to interact with people as an invitation. And if other people shut that invitation down because they don't have time or they're not in the right mood or whatever, okay, no problem. But rather than me sort of trying to tamp down my children's enthusiasm before it could potentially bother somebody else, I'm trying to make a little bit more room for them to be who they are and less controlling on my part and just see what happens. Not knowing, of course, what the outcome will be, but just to see what happens. That's a newish change to me. And like I said, still definitely something ongoing. All right, I wanted to talk about 4 months postpartum today because you hear the phrase wonder weeks. Sometimes, I don't know if that's still a thing, but it was a thing a couple of years ago anyway. Wonder weeks, meaning the developmental milestones or leaps for the baby, especially in the first couple weeks and months of life. But I think 4 months postpartum can be kind of a wonder month for moms. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, generally speaking, you are back to the things that you were going to be back to from either during pregnancy or pre-pregnancy. right? Sort of the first phase, I'll call it, of the postpartum period, I would say more or less is concluded. Probably people are no longer making meals for you. Things that maybe you were taking a hiatus from are probably being reincorporated, if they ever are going to be. They're probably by now being reincorporated back into your daily, weekly, monthly schedule. But then, of course, there still is the aspect of your hormones are probably very low still if your period has not returned, which, of course, there are different stipulations as to when your period might return. But if you're exclusively breastfeeding and meet a couple of other requirements, generally speaking, probably in the first 6 months, your period for most women is not going to come back. Though, of course, my sister, now that I say that, is an obvious exception to that. Hers came back this time at like 6 weeks. It was crazy. But for most women, right, your hormones are still fairly low if you are breastfeeding, in particular if you're exclusively breastfeeding. So you are sort of going into the fray with these lower hormones, but at the same time, kind of things are back to normal. So they're not, but they are. And then, of course, depending on how your baby's sleeping and if they have any type of ongoing medical issues or you have any type of ongoing medical issues, I just think 4 months is a really crucial time to kind of take stock of where you are. Excuse me. And there are just a couple of things I wanted to bring up from my own experience of 4 months postpartum. Not because I'm telling you that your postpartum ought to look like this, but just to hopefully get you thinking a little bit about either what's coming or where you're at, to have a sense of progress, a sense of place, I think. One thing that is definitely different now is that this was the month. So I'm just now 5 months postpartum, but it was in the around the 4.5, close to this 5 month mark, that I finally stopped feeling dog tired every single morning. And my daughter, mind you, my daughter has been more or less sleeping through the night since week 6, maybe. And when I say that, I'm kind of waving my hand, right? So about 10:30, she goes to sleep, and she sleeps till about 5 or 6 or 6:30. It all kind of depends. And sometimes she's up at 4, occasionally she's up at 3, but generally speaking, I have at a minimum a 6 hour stretch, usually, sometimes 7, sometimes even closer to 8. So I have been sleeping relatively well for all that time. And yet, it really wasn't until the last couple weeks that I was noticing when I woke up, oh my goodness, I'm not thinking, wouldn't it be nice to stay in bed for another 3 hours? And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that. This is a little bit tangential, but I'm doing some research soon for an article on where the recommendation came for 500 extra calories for women during the postpartum, postpartum, if you are breastfeeding your baby. And the preliminary research that I'm looking at suggests 500 actually may be an underestimate, and of what our needs are, particularly not just replacing what was lost during pregnancy, but also maintaining ongoing nourishment for both ourselves and the baby. Because, of course, as you already know, probably the baby gets first dibs on our nutrients, and some things the baby's going to get enough of no matter what. And then for other nutrients, the baby will only get what we have to give. So the baby could potentially be deficient in certain nutrients if we are. Whereas with other things, the baby's going to get enough no matter what. And I say that in quotations, we would be depleted. But in either scenario, of course, we want enough for ourselves. We want enough for our baby. We want to feel our best. So stay tuned on that one. Stay tuned on what can come from what I find, because I'm going to be writing about it. But of course, I'll share whatever I learn here too. But I'm curious to see if that plays a role in terms of how long it takes to feel more energized, and if maybe the emphasis on 500 calories is enough, so to speak, but enough meaning that you're also going to be able to lose weight. I want to know how that ties in with this question of when is it roughly a good time to start thinking about losing weight. And before that point, whatever it is, it would make more sense to just eat to fuel, eat to fuel, eat to fuel. We'll see. We'll see what comes from all of that. But simply just saying, it's only been in the last couple of weeks that I've noticed I'm not waking up as tired in the mornings. And part of that is also, I think, a little bit a result of intentional decisions. One of them being that my phone needs to be out of my room at night so that the blue light, I don't have any of those fancy glasses, so that the blue light, I'm not being exposed to it. I was turning it to gray mode, but I still think that just the idea of whatever I was interacting with on my phone, even if it was just text messages, still had my brain going, even if the light was the correct shade. And what else along those lines? Oh, the other thing I was just thinking was, yeah, decreasing exposure to media of any kind a couple of hours before bed so that my brain was not in overdrive, so to speak, as I was laying down, maybe laying down on time, but perhaps not getting as much rest because it was taking me longer to fall asleep or not having as restful quality sleep as possible. That's something I've noticed. Another thing that's been a shift in this 4 month range postpartum is just the idea of incorporating movement into the entire day. My pelvic floor therapist said at some point in the last 6 weeks, "What do you mean you don't think you're moving enough? You have all these children." I said, "Well, yeah, but I'm not physically running after them most of the day, and I homeschool the older two, so I sit in a chair a fair amount of the time." It was funny to me that I don't quite know what she pictures when she says or thinks that I have 5 children. I don't quite know what she's picturing. But yes, there are dishes and there are laundry, but also some of those things I'm offloading and delegating to other members of the household, at least in part. And then two, we're not on a homestead. I'm not farming. We live in a rural-ish community, but it's uh, not a highly physically demanding life that I'm living just naturally. And I have been made aware through, frankly, social media, but just more aware of, oh, yeah. Yeah, even if I were to exercise, a hardcore exercise time of 30 to 45 minutes, let's say 4 times a week, but that's still the vast majority of my day, the rest of my day, that I'm potentially really not moving. And I will say that the Hinge Health app, I've mentioned it before. I'll do a review of it down the road because I've only been using it for a little bit over a month now. But excuse me, they send you notifications every morning. Of course, every app sends you notifications, right? But I only have 3 apps on my phone that aren't preloaded into it. And they say to get you to do these little workout is kind of a stretch because some of the exercises are in fact stretches while a few of them are strengthening, but none of them are crazy. None of them are more than 8 reps per exercise. But just the idea of movement, that I'm starting my day with movement, seems to bleed over into other things. And then it leads me to maybe go outside and walk around a little bit or play with my kids more or rake the leaves or what have you. That's been a key of this 4 month period as well, I would say. First, feeling less tired when I wake up. Second, just being mindful of incorporating more movement into the day. Something else that's been different this time, and I suppose it's not a surprise given that there was so much pain that I experienced during the actual pregnancy with Cecilia, but I have still been having quite a bit of pain on the right side of my knee and tons of tightness in my calf and then also right lower back. And those are the locations of the pain that I was having previously, except the right hip. The right hip is stronger now. Still not as strong as the left hip, but at least the right hip doesn't really hurt anymore. That's the bright point. But I have been having a lot more pain than I expected. And even though my diastasis recti is down to, I think, 1 finger gap, and that's been for quite a while now, actually, that I'm very grateful for. But my pelvic floor therapist and I, we've still been working on low back pain and weakness leading to the calf being very tight. It's funny to me how you can have these weird kinds of aches and pains. Same thing with right shoulder pain and like a tennis elbow type thing from, I think, a combination of the work that I do editing and writing is mostly on the computer, but then also these weird awkward angles that you try to get into when you're breastfeeding your baby. Uh, it surprises me again every time that there are strange aches and pains that you can have from pregnancy, but then also trying to remember that the relaxin, as long as you're breastfeeding, your relaxin is still going to be keeping things very loose and mobile throughout your body. And I've experienced that, but all of that simply to say, in the last couple of weeks, so during that 4 month range again, I have started going to a chiropractor in addition to the physical therapist. The physical therapist, I would say, has helped me strengthen, but the chiropractor in the couple of visits that I've been to is helping with actual pain and hopefully getting things more into alignment. She's also having me ice my back, which now that I think about it, I intended to do while I was recording this and then I forgot. We'll have to do that again tomorrow. All right, so those 3 things: moving more, seeking out care of a chiropractor, and part B of that would be continuing to see the pelvic floor therapist, and also making sure that sleep is what it can be. I haven't really noticed a sleep regression with Cecilia, but we did move her in the 4-month window out of the pack and play because she outgrew it. And she's now in the crib with her and her little brother, or her big brother's room. We've got a bunk bed bolted to the wall for the 4-year-old. We've got the 2-year-old in the toddler bed. And then she is now in the crib, which is just sort of a milestone, right? When the baby gets out of whatever the smallest sleeping area is that they sleep in and kind of graduates on. It's good, but it's also a little nostalgic. Something else has been increasing my independence a little bit more. I went a couple of times in the last month with my good friend to line dance without the baby. And it's a little funny because it's a 22-minute drive there. I stay for an hour and then drive 22 minutes back just to make sure that by the time she's going down, I'm able to feed her because I haven't needed to pump. I have pumping stuff, but I haven't needed to pump so far. And that's the funny little thing that I drive. I stay for just about an hour on the dot and then drive back. But it is so life-giving to me to dance in any form, really. But line dancing is one of the few forms that I would say is still acceptable, probably when you're a married woman and your husband doesn't dance. But line dancing has been just, enjoyable. It's good exercise, but I love it. I guess that's just it. I love it very much. Was there anything I wanted to say other than that? I don't think so. A video that I watched along this theme of, and this is not specific to 4 months, but this is, I would say, a major theme of this podcast in general for me is this idea that we can always study and grow, and we are never meant to be a victim to our circumstances, even if by circumstances I just mean, not for that to sound dramatic, but postpartum. We are never a victim of postpartum, right? We are never need to stay in a victim role. We can always study and we can always grow. And I was watching a little video January Donovan, who's the founder of the Women's School, did the other night. It was something along the lines of things children, daughters specifically, need from their mothers. And I wrote down all of them, but a couple of them I was just thinking about in relation to this last month and where I am about 4 months postpartum. Some of the things that she said daughters need from their mothers, one is to see their faith in God. And I've just been a little bit more aware of this question of, am I living my day in light of eternity? I tend to be a planner. And by that, I mean, I love it. I so enjoy meal planning, thinking about Thanksgiving. We're hosting some of my family this year and some friends from church. I love to think about that. What are we going to eat? And when am I going to get it? What are my timeline for preparation? And then Christmas, etc. I love to plan, but am I being present? And also, am I ordering my day to say that the most important thing in my life is my faith and getting to heaven and hopefully helping my children get to heaven? And that's led me to realize I need to use my phone less, but I also need to be more aware of spiritual touch points throughout my day. To be frank, I already read a fair amount of articles online about different spiritual topics in the course of a day. I'm actually coming across quite a few Bible verses as one example. But am I allowing them to sink in? Am I sitting with them? Am I praying with them? It's just something I would like to be a little bit more intentional about, a little bit more attuned to. That's the point of faith in God as being one thing a daughter needs to see from her mother. Something else is that a mother needs to show that she has self-respect. Her daughter needs to see that for her. And I had a conversation with a member of my family of origin this month. And afterwards, I just told my husband, I just realized that I was really grasping for affirmation and validation in that conversation. And while somebody else pointed out to me later on when I was sharing that same conversation with them, because I went and did a session with my ERP therapist, I've had 2 since the birth. So 2 in the last 4 months, kind of as checkups. And I was just telling him, I felt so frustrated with myself, realizing I gave like a 10-minute answer to this question that this person asked. And I realized later that was me seeking their affirmation. That was me seeking their validation. My husband, James, pointed that out to me. But the therapist distinguished and clarified. He said, there is nothing wrong with that desire to have that affirmation validation from that family member. That is a good and beautiful desire to want their love and affection and care and affirmation of you in that way. But knowing that you still get to recognize that that person may not have that to give, but also that at the end of the day, no other person can fully validate us, no matter how intentional they are, how much they even want to. And it was just a reminder to me that I need to and want to model to my daughter self-respect, and just thinking through, okay, the next time I am asked a question like that from somebody, I can give a 1 minute answer. I can give a thoughtful 1 minute answer, but it does not need to be a grasping at validation from somebody when ultimately no other external person can validate who we are. A third point that January pointed out was letting yourself be nurtured by other people. And I've talked about that in the past, right? About attuning ourselves or making ourselves aware of whenever somebody offers to help us. If somebody asks, how can I help you? Or if they offer to help us, actually allowing them to do so, being vulnerable, being humble, and accepting that offer of help. And my husband was at deer camp last week, which is going to tie into another point from the video. But my husband was at deer camp over the weekend, and I had all 5 kids here for 2 nights. And my friend invited us over the second night for supper with her and her kids, because her husband was also at deer camp that particular evening as well. And it was such a gift. She served us in that way, and it got us out of the house. I didn't have to do any dishes or really food prep. It was a gift. It was a real gift to us. And allowing ourselves to be nurtured. On the one hand, I think we can all point out examples of ways that we would like to be nurtured but don't have the opportunity right now, or the ways in which we believe other people have failed us, or the things that we need but needs that aren't being met. But to be able to look and see, this was an opportunity that I had to be nurtured. I took advantage of that opportunity. That was such a good thing. I want my daughter to see that. I want my daughter to, at a minimum, accept, but even to learn to reach out. Learning to ask for help is such a skill. And that's why I always hammer home the idea of the grandma tribe, and asking for, or creating, forming, building a grandma tribe, is because asking for help is at the heart of that. And to learn to ask for help is something that we as moms have to be, I would say, always achieving greater and greater mastery of that skill. Another point that January made was learning to manage failure. And that is just something that every day, with 5 kids, this point in postpartum, 4 months, right, where I was saying we're at the intersection of low hormones still, but in a lot of ways resuming normal activities, I have many opportunities to manage failure on a daily basis, especially when it comes to being patient and present with my own children, and letting go of the idea that I need to, in quotation marks, do a particular work thing by a particular time, because the honest to goodness truth is that there is no fire that needs to be put out when it comes to any editing or writing work that I'm doing. I put that pressure on myself almost exclusively, actually. And managing failure is learning to recognize where I am bumping up against my own unrealistic expectations, or just expectations that might have been realistic, but they need to be flexible now. Managing failure is accepting that I need to be nimble in my approach to a lot of things in my day. Another point is emotional command. And she talks about how our emotions can be our superpower as women, because we have the capacity to nurture other people. And it is through our emotions that we become aware of their needs and how we can help serve and love them. But she talks about also not being run by our emotions, and how we are seeking emotion. We show emotional command when we integrate our emotions towards our highest good, which would be towards self-gift, towards living in the light of God's love and presence in our lives. And that is something that, as you can well imagine, I am trying to learn every day too, especially when it comes to apologizing, recognizing first, but then apologizing when I am not, in fact, displaying emotional command. And then another point she made was taking care of our men. And my goodness, that could be like a whole mercy firestorm on the internet, right? That's not the point of this. But she talked about how if our superpower, one of our superpowers is to nurture other people, that can include men too. And that is just something that I have recognized painfully at first, certainly for the first several years, But I have recognized that going deer hunting, which occurs from October 1st to the middle of January, that's deer hunting season every year, to have my husband go out as often as he can, as often as it makes sense for our family, which is not every day, of course, but a couple times a week, most of the weeks, is what it translates to. For him to go out, to be in nature, to get time away in the silence, in the solitude, in the fresh air, getting the vitamin D, and potentially, because I'm no longer expecting this, that was an expectation I had to let go of, potentially getting a deer for our family. He's had one this year so far, which is great. He's got 3 tags left to fill if he can, but not expecting that he brings a deer home, but just simply saying this is time for him to rest and recharge. And I will adjust what we are doing at home, or even just what our rhythms are while he is gone, so that it is not such a stressful thing for me that I'm resentful of him going. And excuse me, that might look like a simplified meal for the night that he's gone. It might mean putting the little boys to bed a little bit sooner. It might mean I'm not able to work during that time, even after little boys go to bed, because maybe that's the time that a few things need to get cleaned or what have you. But I've learned that a particular way to take care of him and his heart, and honestly to refresh and recharge him for the work that he needs to do, and that I am counting on from him for our family, is making sure that he's got that time and space to go out and do some deer hunting. Those are some things, lady. I wonder what your 4 months postpartum is like. I hope it's going so well. I'll talk to you soon.